All right, we're going to have a look at the stories that are making the international press headlines this morning. And we start with this one. The FT, if successful, it would be the biggest free trade area in history. Now the US and Europe have given themselves 2 years to complete talks on a new trade pact. The FT sounds a note of caution, though, commenting that previous such initiatives have disappointed.
Now let's stay with the pink paper, whose birthday it was yesterday, I might add. It says big companies could be banned from bidding for big UK government contracts under new rules intended to clamp down on aggressive tax avoidance.
As the Horsemeat scandal spreads even wider, The Times reports traditional local butchers may be benefiting from the crisis of confidence in supermarket meat.
Business is booming for Russian arms suppliers too, according to today's Moscow Times. It says sales doubled last year and Syria remains a key customer.
Le Figaro says Apple is reeling from a Brazilian ruling that it doesn't have exclusive rights to the iPhone trademark there. Local company Gradiente Electronica registered the name in 2000. That's 7 years before the tech giant.
And The Telegraph reports on a UK study to see if customers are prepared to consume more of their electricity on windy days when green power is cheaper. Participants will be alerted by a text message when blowy conditions mean it might be a good time to put the washing on, and of course you can dry it on your line as well. It's a win-win.
Indeed. Well, that's what we're going to ask Cornelius Meyer about in just a little while. Cornelius from the business consultancy MRL Corporation. Good morning. How nice to see you.
Good morning.
And a happy Valentine's Day.
Same to you.
Let's start then with the FT. The FT's raising the possibility of the complications of this tie-up between the US and the EU, which is rather interesting.
Well, you know, it is going to be rather tricky and rather interesting, because on one hand we have the WTO, which should sort of basically solve all these things, and in terms of tariffs we are pretty far ahead with we in Europe with the US. The thing then is it will be sort of non-tariff barriers like standards and so on. And the complication is you have 27 member nations and 27 governments, then you have US Congress, and then you have the EU Parliament. So this is one gigantic mega negotiations. And I was involved in the US beef and orange negotiations with Japan. And that was tough already. Now this is going to be, you know, tough galore.
And 2 years? 2 years, is that realistic?
No.
In a word. But in a way, though, you kind of wonder, in the kind of globalised world that we live in, etc., why we haven't got here already. I mean, I know you've just explained all the barriers to entry, but you kind of think, no, the US and the EU already teamed up.
I'd rather not see these bilateral agreements between countries or country blocs, but global agreements via the WTO. Because why do we have the WTO when we then always have these bilateral agreements?
Good question.
So,
well,
you know, I'm a born free trader, so I...
Well, let's look at the other article on the front page of the FT. Another move by the government to try and make sure no one is avoiding paying tax. And this is all about those who supply to government departments. They're going to be, you know, even more scrutinised.
Well, the question is, what is a tax avoidance scheme? We come into definitional questions, and the question is also, when you then deal with the very big companies, such as the EDFs of this world, is there any company left that hasn't engaged in any of these practices? So it's going to be, this is a good thought, and I'm all behind it, but its implementation is going to be somewhat tricky.
I mean, it seems that the distinction is being made between, if you like, ordinary tax avoidance and aggressive tax avoidance. So it might be a matter of degree.
It's a matter of degree, but then, you know, as long as you're legal, if you're a company, you say, well, I've kept myself in the realms of legality. So this is going to be a difficult one, because it will take judgment as to what is aggressive tax avoidance. So that's going to be a rather challenging policy to implement, I think.
Because it has been a very unpopular revelation, hasn't it? The extent to which some of the major companies, high street companies, to which they are able to to reduce their corporate tax
But
bill.
you see, this is populism pure, and whether that really works in avoiding contracts, I'd rather have them concentrate on what is the best quality at the optimal price to what we get than going back over the past. Yes, this is very bad that this happened, but we should say clean slate, let's go forward, but let's have the right procurement rules. And this may be one rule, but really the main thing when you procure is to get at the right price, the right quality for what you're trying to achieve.
Now, talking of right price, right quality, and what you're trying to achieve, the Horsemeat scandal is, you know, gathering pace with every single day. There's new angles, new ways of looking at this. And The Times is looking at the fact that it says supermarkets could take years to recover from this public crisis of confidence because everybody is going to their local butcher and getting meat from the local farmer where they believe it's not been tampered with, it's not something they're being told it's not, etc., etc.
Well, I would like to support the local butcher, and I think this is great. But we are living also in times of a possibly triple-dip recession, so price will come into it. So people will recover from this very quickly.
So you think this is actually perhaps an over-exaggerated fear?
It's an over-exaggerated fear, but it would be a good thing if we look at food miles, that we look where our food is coming from. The thing is, this is not a food scandal. This is a labeling issue, which could, if it was worse, lead to a food scandal if you label something that's toxic as non-toxic. But I think we should sort of have a little bit of perspective here, but certainly address food labeling and what we're doing with food labeling.
Well, as ever, perception is often more important than reality, isn't it? And the fact is the big supermarkets that have been named in this are going to take a reputational hit, aren't they? That's going to impact on profits.
That's going to impact on profits, but as I said, times are tough, so people will go for price.
Now, tell us about this story in the Moscow Times, looking at Russia selling twice as many weapons abroad last year as it had done in the previous year. Syria remains a very important client.
Well, yeah, Russia is a major defense exporter, defense product exporter. So is the U.S. So I would like to sort of, you know, these 37 billion compared to the U.S. spending are probably not that big. Syria is a big client. They have different. Russia has different views of where to export to than the West does, and for Russia, Syria has the only Mediterranean port, so they will do whatever it takes to keep access for their fleet to the Mediterranean. So sad as it is reality.
And I think many of us will be surprised that there aren't sanctions against selling weapons to Syria. But anyway, we need to move on to Le Figaro. And Apple having a bit of a torrid time of it in Brazil, certainly when it comes to the iPhone.
Yes, I mean, it shows how quickly you need to register your trademark and that you can't just register only in the major markets, and that Brazil is become a major market.
I mean, they had a similar problem in China, Apple did recently.
And they had to pay quite a bit of money to get themselves out of that problem.
And very briefly, are you into the idea of, you know, washing on a blowy day, i.e. your energy bill will be further down because you're washing on a day when the wind turbines are pumping out the energy?
If I had the time, I would love to do that. But on a bit more serious note, a lot of countries have done this for quite some time. Let's say Switzerland, they've had in the 60s when there was peak demand, you couldn't put on your washing machine. It wouldn't go on. It was blocked. So this is nothing new.
But this is all about, isn't this all about the potential of the provision of more green energy, so energy supplied from wind turbines or whatever?
Well, and that is the problem with the energy that is supplied intermittently, such as wind and solar, because the wind does not always blow and the sun does not always shine. So we need really smart grids.
Cornelia Meyer, thank you very much indeed for coming in and taking us through the newspapers today. And thank you very much for being with us.
Bye-bye.
BBC World News.
See you soon.